Anybody who's the firstborn, which I'm glad.
Or a mother could lose her husband and her firstborn.
Yes. Yeah. Makes me glad I was the baby of the family. But, yeah, so it was devastating. It was totally devastating to everybody. And every Egyptian would have known the cause of it. All right. Well, they were supposed to be put up in the barn for the hail. So they had, I think they had some measure of cattle in Goshen. My instinct would say that they would be covered because the household would be covered. Because the lamb was sized to the house. It was sized right. If you're a family of 4, yeah, that's one lamb's worth or whatever the math ended up being. But if you were a smaller family, you would split that lamb with another family. So my gut says that it would cover the people and the animals, but I don't know. I have a lot of those answers tonight. Yes. Yeah, and he recognized that God has the power, but he would not submit to God. It's like where the Bible says that the devils know and they tremble, but they will not surrender themselves to the Lord. And it's the same thing we see with Pharaoh. All right, so we can go ahead on to the next slide there, Sam. We finally get to the title of the book here, the Exodus. So, verse 33, and the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we be all dead men. So the Egyptians have caught wind, they understand what's going on. They say, all right, let's get these Israelites out of here before there's more dead Egyptians tomorrow. And they took the people their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. So they had to get out quick. Their bread had not risen yet. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels and silver and jewels of gold and raiment. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. So what was the promise that God gave Moses long before all this started? Is that eventually Pharaoh's going to let you go and they're going to pay you on your way out the door. So this is the payoff of that promise, is that the Egyptians gave them all of the gold, silver, and jewelry. They're not going to do the right thing with it, but that's a lesson for another day. Yeah, I don't think those Egyptians were ever getting it back. But verse 37, and the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot, besides children. So that's 600,000 men, plus any of their wives, plus any of their kids. So we are dealing with over 1 million people at this point in time who are going to make this journey out the wilderness. I just forget the 10 plagues that happened, the miracle of the logistics of getting 1 million people together, to getting 1 million people fed, and getting 1 million people out on the road. It's just mind-boggling to me. God had to be in the center of it just for the logistics of it to get them out the door. But the first leg of the journey is going to be from Ramses to Succoth. And I think that, so next slide, which we'll get to here in just a minute, is going to show the map between where those two places are. And I think that was just sort of to ease them into this journey. So it was a pretty easy hike he had them all do. It's still fairly green there. They're not out in the desert. They can do it in about a day, just enough to get their toes wet before they have to spend 40 years out there. But let's move on. Verse 38, and a mixed multitude went up with him also, and flocks and herd, even very much cattle. And they baked unleavened cakes of dough, which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any victual. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass, that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night to be observed unto the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord which is to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations. So it's just a few random notes thrown in, just a few reminders for us. The mixed multitude, how they took their flocks, how they took their cattle. Just a reminder as to why the bread was unleavened there in verse 39, in case you forgot. And then it gives us some timeline information. So this is a very important piece of information. So we've talked about the timeline of the Exodus before, haven't we? And we talked about how in 2 Kings chapter 6, with the Solomon's temple, where it gives us, we have a solid date for the year Solomon built the temple. From there, the Bible says this was the 480th year after the Exodus. Well, we get to the Exodus here, and it gives us another date. 430 years before that is when Joseph came to Egypt. So we can start piecing together the timeline of the Bible. When we find our anchor point there with King Solomon, we can do the math and figure out, okay, here's when we got all the way back to Joseph. And then from Joseph's life, we can work our way back to Jacob, from Jacob to Isaac, from Isaac to Abraham, from Abraham to Terah, and we can work our way all the way back, if we do the math right, to creation. Which I think is really cool, how the Bible is precise. It does have the details we need to understand these kind of things. But I don't have time to be on my soapbox there, so let's move on. We get a little bit more clarity. So I mentioned that he's going to talk about the Passover several different times. We get a little bit more clarity there starting in verse 43. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger eat thereof, but every man's servant that is bought for money, when thou hast circumcised him, then shall he eat thereof. A foreigner and a hired servant shall not eat thereof. In one house it shall be eaten. Thou shalt not carry forth aught of the flesh abroad out of the house, neither shall ye break a bone thereof. So these are some of the rules for all of the Passovers to come. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover of the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born of the lamb. For no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. One law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. Thus did all the children of Israel, as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass the selfsame day that the Lord did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies. All right, so something I want to look at, and it's not the point of this passage, but it gives us some biblical insights here. Who is Passover for? It's easy. Think the easy answer. The Jewish people, right? That wasn't a trick question. So Passover is for the Jewish people. What about the sojourners? Let's talk about what is a sojourner. Does somebody want to give me the definition of a sojourner? Yeah, a visitor, right? A journeying visitor. So this is somebody who would come into the land just for a time. They're not part of the crowd yet. So the Bible is going to make a distinction here about the sojourners who are there for a time and the sojourners who are going to assimilate into the people. So Passover is just for the Jewish people. It's not for anybody else outside of that circle. The sojourner who comes and who is there just for a little while, who intends to leave, Passover's not for them. But if they want to come in, they want to get circumcised, they want to join the people, then it's the same. Where it says that one that is born of the lamb, one law shall be to him that is homeborn and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. So it's breaking those two apart. This is for us, this is for our visitors, this is for our guests. But if one of our guests wants to get circumcised and join us, they're welcome to. There are some, and again, this is a powder keg to try to talk about in church. So excuse me for a moment, but there is a lot of tension in America around immigration. Would you agree? And I think that we have some biblical principles, and I'm going to walk on eggshells as much as I can when I say this. But the Bible does give us instruction on how to care for the sojourner, but also what it means for the sojourner to assimilate and for the sojourner who doesn't want to assimilate. It doesn't give a moral quality to either of those people, the sojourner who's here to stay and the sojourner who's here to visit. But there are different ways that you treat those people. And have I left it broad enough to not get anybody mad? All right. So, looks like we're not going to get into chapter 13 tonight, which is all right. But some of the other rules in verse 46 that we see here is that the lamb that was brought in, it is to stay in the house. So you can't start this Passover process and then take some leftovers over to your neighbor. This is one lamb, one house. If you need to share, you needed to figure that out before you killed the beast. Because there was a rule for that. Yes, anything that is not consumed gets roasted. You can't boil it. You can't cook it any other way but roast it over the fire. And anything that is not consumed has to be burned because it's going back to God where it came from. And then, neither shall ye break a bone thereof. Coming up on Easter time, I think there are some Christ parallels that you find just in that. I think that'll pair up with some prophecy that we'll see later on in the Old Testament, and then ultimately we'll see with Christ on the cross, which isn't a huge salvation thing, but it's cool to note that there's a recurring theme. But I think that's where we'll stop tonight. Does anybody have anything before we?
Did I miss something? Where did we get from calling them Israelites to calling them Jewish people?
I don't know. No, there is a lot of discussion around that, and there's also another name that we call them by. That's the Hebrew. So we've got them called by the Israelites. They're called Israel from Jacob. So Jacob's name is changed to Israel. And that's a very clear, these are the children. When it says the children of Israel, you could say they're the children of Jacob, and you're saying the same thing. But when we talk about the Jewish people and the Hebrew people, we're talking about all the same people. But when each of those names came into play, Hebrew, I've heard, is even just was a Gentile or a pagan name for him, the Abiru. But I'm going to have to look that up. It is worth noting. We know the children of Israel, the Jewish people, and the Hebrew name. I want to look that up. Potentially. Looks like we all got some homework for this week.
Well, you didn't touch on Exodus, how we got the book of Exodus. You said, didn't you say that? Or did I sleep through that?
Oh. So when they left Egypt, that is the Exodus. So that those 12 verses or whatever, that the night that they leave, that's what we formally call the Exodus, the exit. Yep. So that's where we get it, is just from that night that they left, went from Ramses to Succoth.
So when Jesus Christ was the supreme sacrifice, the Jews never did this Passover ritual anymore?
So the Jews stopped doing this Passover ritual. A lot of the sacrifices were done after 70 AD. That is when the temple was formally destroyed by the Roman Empire. So there is the post-temple period. A lot of things changed, and that's when we see the sacrificing being phased out. It's worth noting, though, that Paul, the Apostle Paul, he still participated in some of these sacrifice rituals even after he came to Christ, because it was still an example. The sacrifice is an example of Christ. That was in their tradition. So, yes, hard to break away, but it was still something that this is a reminder of Christ. It's always pointing us back to him. I did have a couple of slides. So we talked about the first leg of the journey from Ramses to Succoth. Sam, you want to go to the next slide there? So finding accurate Exodus maps has proven to be a challenge, but I want to try to get as accurate of information as possible. This is, to the best of what I could find, people argue about where Ramses was, people argue about where Succoth was, but I tried to find the best resources, pull it up on Google Maps. You could walk it in 8.5 hours according to Google if you're in good shape. Getting 1 million people to do that, though, that would have been a full day. So that looks like a pretty far journey if you were to just look at the 40 kilometers there, because it's in Egypt. It gave it to me in metric. Sam, do you want to go to the next one? That little blue line there, that's all the distance they covered. So they've got a long way to go. You can see that, my little red dot, and the little blue line attached to it. So what looked like an 8.5 hour walk, that's all that they covered, was that little amount there. They've got a long way to get to Israel, especially considering they're going to go to the bottom of that triangle along the way. They're taking the long way there. So still shouldn't have taken 40 years, but they got quite a bit of hiking in front of them.
I did the math on that. So if you figure there's 1.5 million people, and you stretch them out the line, that's 930 miles. That's a lot of people.
That is,
That area is 175. So I think they just went around circles for 40 years, following each other.
yeah.
That's what I think.
No, you're absolutely right.
Follow the cloud, and the last person followed the first person.
So God is going to guide them with the pillar of fire and the cloud. But if they were just to take a straight shot, I've heard that it would only have been a 6-day walk, but it ended up being 40 years because they did. Yeah, because of disobedience. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves there. Does anybody have anything else before we close in prayer? Yes, Bob.
So with the bones, does that have, do you know, would that have to be like a purity thing almost, or something with that, with the sheep being whole, I guess? Or is that more something beyond their comprehension, if that makes sense?
I think that it may be as simple as wanting to keep that image of the unbroken bones for the prophecies that are going to come later. I didn't really zero in on the later prophecies of that. I would take a look at the later prophecy. I want to say it's in Isaiah. I don't know. And then reflect that back on Exodus, if that makes sense.
Isn't there one in Psalms too, or the main one's in Isaiah then? Or, 'cause I know there's one in Psalms, but.
Might be Psalms. But I would say whatever prophecy it is, I think that is the kingpin on which the Passover lamb and Christ are going to center around, because they're a reflection of each other.
That time where they said, don't break Jesus' legs?
Yes.
From the bones?
Yep. that's what we're getting at there. Anybody have anything else before we come to a close? Far enough back they were, but they were far enough away they could marry each other. So, yep. And can you imagine? Family reunions are bad enough. Now multiply that by 100,000. But anybody, if nobody has anything else, everybody please stand tonight. So I want to give you the opportunity to pray. So with every head bowed, every eye closed, so we tarry just for a moment in time. If there's anything that the Lord has put on your heart tonight, you want to find yourself at an altar of prayer, now is your opportunity to do that. Anybody at all.